So hello and welcome to a slightly different kind of video today. Hopefully this is going to be just the first in a long series of more interview or discussion type videos where I speak with some of the world's best international archers and maybe some coaches as well. I'm hoping that their experience and all their knowledge can help bring some really great benefit and teach you guys some new things as well, learn some new tips, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot as well. So today's video, I'm speaking to Tom Hall, who's a member of the British senior men's team, and let's get right into the video. So hello everyone. Hi Tom, thanks for joining us today on this kind of new era of interview, if you like. How are you doing?
Hey Naresh, I'm doing all right. Yeah. It's been a bit of fun setting everything up and trying to get it working. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think we're going now. So yeah, hopefully it all works out.
Awesome.
I'm feeling pretty good.
Awesome. So I hear this year you've had a little bit of, obviously everyone's had a tricky year, but this year you've also had some kind of injury troubles that you've been dealing with and working through those. And I'm sure, especially from the perspective of the people watching as well, the archers watching, I think it'll be really interesting to kind of go through some of that injury journey and particularly what you've then done in your training, what you've then learnt from that as well and how you would adapt maybe the training next time. But before we get into that, I guess let's just give everyone a little bit of a background, maybe kind of the brief history of your archery career, if you like, just as a little background intro.
So I picked up shooting in 2010 at university. I'd not kind of done it as a kid before, but I kind of happened to stumble across it at the sports fair. Joined the Uni of Warwick archery team, and about 5 weeks later I was doing my first competition as a novice, going, this is awesome. I was hooked pretty quickly. I remember someone called Rachel in the club told me, hey, if you practice you could be good at this, and I went, ooh, that's fun. I've not been good at a sport before. So it just kind of escalated from there, really. I spent probably the first 5 years or so kind of working up through the university sort of progression, really, going from novice to team member to kind of winning some of the Bucks team competitions, and then going on to the World University Games with you. On my first ever international trip. I was woefully unprepared for that. Genuinely, I just kind of went into the selection shoot because I had the scores. I thought, why not? And then I shot my skin off in the selection shoot, and absolutely started on fire, set a PB for the first 36 hours, and then just kind of tailed away for the next 3 sets of 3 dozen, but just kind of hung on enough to make the team by a couple of points at the end. And that was a really formative experience for me, because I went away. This huge atmosphere, the opening ceremony, just
quite different. It
blows your mind. And I thought, I've got to come back and do this again, even though the competition itself I got utterly hammered. And that was kind of
that gave you the bug, right?
That was the realization that actually, where I thought the limits were, that's not where they are. No, there's a lot more points out there, and there's a lot of good people around the world. I thought, I've got to come back and try this again. So I did that a couple more times at the World Uni stuff. Went to Mongolia, which was an experience for the university champs, and then again to Taipei, and then it was 2017 that I really kind of cracked it and got onto the national team as well for the World Cups and things. And I just had a bit of a crazy, since then, really, it's not really stopped. It's been an onslaught of competitions, and it's been really good. But through that time, I've just always been trying to progress to the next level, trying to find people who are better than me, get beaten by them, and then figure out why they're beating me.
And then how to
try and run it a bit closer the next time.
That's awesome.
The last couple of years, managed to get to number 1 in the UK and win some of the national tournaments that I've been trying and kind of knocking on the door for a while. But it never stops. The standard keeps coming up as well. So now the scores needed to win that stuff are 10, 15 points higher than they were
much higher
3 or 4 years ago, and it's only going up as well. So got to constantly be looking for the improvement. So.
And that's what you always want, isn't it?
It feels like I've just started still. I don't feel like I've been doing it for ages, but then I talk to people like, I've been shooting for 10 years and I'm on the national team for 4 years. I'm like, okay. Maybe maybe it has been a while, but it still feels, because I'm just kind of looking forwards all the time and trying to work out, okay, what do I do next? So
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't feel like it's been that long.
No, and when you're in it, it's very, very engrossing, isn't it? So how was that?
Absolutely.
You mentioned there about Korea, it was in Korea, the university games that year. Did that give you when you went to, that opening ceremony, that competition, obviously, and then you had that experience, did that give you the kind of thing where you're like, okay, I'm gonna go to aim for the Olympics? And because obviously recently you got the team spots for Great Britain for Tokyo.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I don't think Olympics themselves kind of jumped into my mind, but I just thought, I've got to get back here. It was kind of, in a lot of ways, it's a lot like a mini Olympics, the World University Games.
Yeah.
It's there's not a tournament like it in some ways. It's only in terms of like mainstream sort of how much people know about it does it fall behind, but actually what they do is very similar. The Athletes Village is very similar, the opening ceremony is really similar. And I absolutely got the heebie-jeebies kind of like walking in through that stadium entrance with just tens of thousands of people going nuts and walking around the stadium and thinking, how am I here? How did this happen? And I thought, I've got to do that again. So the year after that, there was another kind of key moment where it was the Rio selection shoot, and I came fifth in that. Which was still kind of punching above my weight at the time. I had a really good shoot.
Right.
And kind of like, pushed some people who would have been looking to contend a little bit lower down the rankings. And although I was never sort of consistent enough to trouble the top four on that one, I kind of thought, well, I'm fifth now. I've got 4 years till the next one. The gap is not that big anymore. That's the point where it kind of dawned on me, hey, why not?
Yeah.
Kind of before then, I'd not really thought about it, and then after that, I thought, well, why not? Why can't I?
Yeah. What's stopping me? There's
actually,
nothing in the way. Yeah.
Yeah. I think when you're starting out, or when you've not been to these kind of things before, it almost feels like the people that do this are like different people.
Yeah.
Like
they're not
they're
in the
legends,
same,
like they're myths or something, and you think, wow, these people are Olympic archers. These people are international archers.
Something special. Wow.
Yeah, and it's the people.
Yeah.
At one point,
the same. Yeah.
Everyone learned to shoot at some point. Everyone was, no one was awesome the moment they picked up a bow for the first time. Some people improved quicker than others, and it might look like they just instantly got good, but everyone's done the work to get there.
Yeah.
I realise actually there's nothing stopping me from where I am now, making the next step. So I thought
to go to the next bit. Yeah, definitely.
Why not?
I think that's a really important lesson there as well, isn't it, for anyone watching to, if they're aspiring to the next level, really, to not limit themselves and think, there's no way I could do that. Like, this person must be something incredible or gifted or talented or whatever. Because exactly from your experience, it shows that actually you're like, no, wait a minute. If I just maybe try and do this in training, speak to them, see how they're beating me, that kind of thing. That kind of mindset is a lot more growth orientated. Yeah,
it's almost kind of, it's like not everyone can go to the Olympics. It just doesn't work like that. There's only 3 people per country. There's limited spaces. It's not the case that just like everyone can go. I think what you can do is you can try and be a little bit better this year than you were last year, and there's no necessary limit on how far that's going to take you. You don't know which people are going to go. Someone's going to go.
Yeah.
Actually, that's the other thing you guarantee. There will be 64 people at the Olympics. So it's kind of like I can't guarantee you're going to succeed. I can't guarantee I'm going to succeed. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I know I can give it a go, and I enjoy the process. So what's to lose?
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Exactly. It's quite
I think if you take an open mindset to it, then I think that's really powerful. Yeah.
And like you say, it's that kind of thing where if you think, well, someone's going anyway, so why is it not going to be me? Why couldn't it be? And that's really good as well. Yeah. So no, that's really good as a kind of brief overview, and I'd definitely say if anyone's watching that is at university and has the option or opportunity to go to the uni games ever in the future, then definitely go for it from Tom and I's experience.
Yeah, it's a life.
Don't regret it at all.
It's a life experience. Yeah, you won't. Some people will go to that and that'll be the only thing they ever do, and phenomenal. They'll take that memory
Yeah.
away the rest of their lives, and absolutely awesome. I think it does a really good job
Yeah.
for people in that situation to kind of give
Yeah,
more
it's
people
incredible.
a chance to experience that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then, so kind of coming on from obviously the uni games, and then you went through the squad. You obviously joined the squad. I can't remember when it was, but I guess it was after 2016, after the selection shoot before the 2017 season.
Kind of the winter of 2016 through to 2017. I started doing a little bit of training with the squad. Kind of Richard Priestman first got his hands on me then, and started thinking, okay, what am I going to do here? And the beginnings of probably about 3 to 4 years worth of guided technical development really started then. With a real long-term sort of structure to what I was doing, which is different to everything I'd done before. I'd always been trying to learn stuff and pick stuff up before, but it was kind of like chasing my own tail sometimes. In some ways I was just trying different things and seeing how well they worked and going in circles, and in some ways my technique in 2012, 2013 might look better than it was in 2015, but my scores had improved. Like I'd got stronger, and my competition abilities had increased, but my technique was not necessarily, didn't have any direction to it. There was always just trying one bit at a time. It was the difference Richard made by having he knew where he wanted to get me in the long term. He didn't really mind how long it took, but it's just constantly molding me, shaping me, trying different things, seeing what I could do, what I was ready for, and then incorporating some of them and leaving some of them to come back to later. Some of the things he gets me to do, he's actually been kind of suggesting the ideas for months beforehand.
planting
the seeds, and then I'll come up to him one day and say, "Hey Richard, I tried doing this." And he'll go, "Yeah, you did."
That's funny.
Good idea, Tom.
It's like you came up with it, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Which is really, really clever on his part. Absolutely. It's deliberate and it's very, very skillfully done. But when you feel like it's your idea, you're motivated. You go for it. You're like, I own this. I'm going to do it. His trick is just to make sure your ideas are his ideas. I think.
Yeah. That's funny. So with that's a really interesting point you made there as well. So the kind of thing that I took from that is when you were not starting out from archery, but when you were kind of coming onto the squad and trying to develop more, you were obviously trying new bits of technique, trying to improve your technique. And I think this is an area where a lot of, club or even national level archers who do national competitions around the world, where they might be at this level and they're trying these different bits of technique, but very much like you back then, they don't know where they're going with that technique necessarily. It feels like they're kind of just trying this and then they're like, oh, okay, how do I measure if this is effective and what is the point of what I'm doing? What would you say to yourself back then, knowing what you know now? Is there a way that you could develop that kind of vision for what you're aiming for a bit better? Like how could you use maybe, I don't know, watching other archers shoot or speaking to other archers, that kind of stuff? What would you say to someone who's in that position now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure. I've thought about, what could I say to past me, and I'm not sure there's much I could, because I think that the journey I went on was important, right? And if it took one of the absolute best coaches in the world 3 years to kind of mold me from where I was into something that looks kind of presentable, as he might call it. I don't know what I could have done to really have made much of a difference to that process. I think one thing that was good was by trying all these different things, it meant that by the time I came to kind of working with someone with that expertise, when he suggested to try something different, there's a good chance I've already done it at some point. So just because it wasn't my technique at the time, I was like, well, 18 months ago, I used to draw like this. Or, I've tried drawing out to the side, or I've tried coming from high, or I've tried kind of drawing up from low. Like I've done all the different things at some point or another. So it makes you versatile. And I think it's pretty useful to be able to at least passably imitate the different ways of shooting a bow, because there's many different ways to do it. And the only kind of, to some extent, the only way to find out which technique works best for you is to sort of try them all and see what sticks.
Yeah.
So
I like that a lot, because I think a lot of people are not scared all the time, but sometimes they might try something different. They might say, okay, I'm not happy with how I'm shooting, something feels off, I want to improve, I don't know, my bow shoulder or my release or whatever, so I'm going to try this. And then they kind of half do it. They try it a little bit.
Yeah, because you don't want to lose what's good. You don't want to lose what's working. That's it. And if your scores take a step backwards temporarily, that's even more.
Like, and then you go, no, what's happening?
Yeah. It's really tough. You got to try and be flexible, because I think in the long term, the gains from that just outstrip, everything you get from just trying to refine only what you do already. Because where did that come from? It's not necessarily just because it works the best for you now, but it doesn't mean it will work the best for you in the future. And you've got to kind of be prepared to play about with it. Really.
Yeah.
And it's more fun that way as well. It's a lot less stressful.
Rather than just
Yeah, definitely. So it's an interesting one, definitely.
Yeah. With that, so say if you were going through the same kind of situation again, would you change anything in your approach of, because this is something I wanted to talk about a little bit more as well, your approach of the kind of ratio of your training. So what I mean by that is, how much of your training is gym work, how much of it is bow training, how much of it is arrow volume, effectively shooting. Those are the kind of three. There are obviously other facets to it, but those are the three primary ones. Would you change anything in that, or would you kind of go the same? Because this was always really interesting for me as well, watching.
So I think I first set foot in a gym with weights in sort of 2014 or 2015.
Okay.
And so for context, I was a skinny kid, and I remain not that heavy, but have put sort of 10 kilos on from going to the gym since.
And eating a lot of pasta.
Yeah, exactly. since starting
if anyone's
shooting.
Watching,
but so I didn't really set foot in there until 2014, 2015, and I think I did just like an intro to weightlifting course at uni. And before that, I'd always been intimidated by it. I was like, the gym is the place where like the big gym lads go. Okay, yeah, sure. If I ever want to learn to bench press for the sake of bench pressing, maybe. But it didn't particularly appeal to me. And then I went there and I realised actually it's just another form of training. It's just got its own slightly different rules, and there's a bit of a bro culture around it, perhaps. But there's no one's gonna like look at me and judge me the moment I walk in, because I'm not already like shredded.
Jacked.
So I started lifting then, and I think had I been doing that sort of previously, even before I'd started archery, just as part of a general exercise thing, I think I probably would have been able to improve a bit faster, because I'd have that physical kind of capability there already. So that's probably one thing that would be nice if I could adjust it.
Yeah. Okay. And then that would give you that kind of baseline foundation as well of the strength and just the muscle coordination and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
I think so. It's like I'm not made for putting on muscle. Like I absolutely know that. It's a lot of hard work for me. I have to. I eat like a horse anyway, but I have to really.
I can vouch for that. Yeah.
Shovel it down and work really hard, and I can put on maybe like a couple of kilos in it over the winter or something. It's really hard work for me. Whereas like I think in 2012, 2013, Emma dragged me into distance running. So Emma's been my partner since slightly longer than I've been shooting. Slowly kind of converging. But she dragged me into distance running. She's always been saying like, "Oh, you'd be good at running," and I was like, running. But I hated cross country at school. I was a bit asthmatic, and then I started doing like park runs and stuff. And I think I beat her PB on my second run, and she got really annoyed. It was like, God damn it, you've not done any training. But so I took really well to that. I'm made for like endurance running and that kind of power to weight ratio. It's like long legs and everything, but that doesn't transfer so much into shooting, sadly. It's nice. It's nice being able to run and being fit, but it's not as beneficial as being able to kind of shift some weight around in the gym. So you've got a lot of extra stuff to consider. But in terms of my actual shooting, I don't know if I'd really play around with it that much. I think I've always done a balance of quite a lot of like just free form technical training. So like just trying things and coming to sessions and like focusing on one particular element and trying to improve it. But it could change session to session or even within a session. It's quite an unstructured form of training, but it's pretty productive for me because I can focus really well. So in a session of 100 arrows or so, I can just, if I get kind of into obsessive mode and I'm really trying to make something work, then I get a lot of learning out of those 100 arrows. And by doing that across lots of different sort of aspects of technique over time, then that kind of really helps ingrain all the things that I do and learn them quickly. So I can adjust my technique quite quickly. It doesn't take me months of trying to enforce a change. I can do it relatively quick, and I think that's a side effect of the way I learned to shoot. And then the other aspect is a lot of competition. Like I said, I did my first competition after 5 weeks. Uni structure was like the indoor season. The winter was almost the bigger season for your club. There are so many student competitions. There's the league matches, there's national competitions, team competitions. I do the county stuff as well, and I'd just be trying to improve on my scores from last year all through the winter, and then we'd come outdoors, and then I'd try and improve my scores from the last summer in the outdoors. So just constantly that balance of doing competitions and trying to improve at the same time. I don't think I ever really had periods where I'd say, okay, I'm not doing competitions now because I'm changing my technique. I'd always just, well, okay, let's see how it works in the next competition. That will just show me where I am. And so
I'd love to just, sorry to cut you off there, but I'd love to just really reinforce that point, because I think this is something I see really often as well. And it's that, I don't want to say fear of competing, but this slight, I'm in this mode of doing the work now, and I'm going to do 6 months of work before I then compete. And I think it's so important not to get into that comfort zone of, I'm just going to do 3 months of blank boss or something, because then you just don't have the iteration. So you want to try and, even deliberately fail in a way, see where you're at, like you just said, in the competition. It's so important. And then you're still in that frame of mind as well, and you see that, oh, actually, I've just saved myself 2 months of working on my bow shoulder in the wrong way because it doesn't quite work.
Because I think if you go away and you say, right, I'm going to blank boss this new bow shoulder position for 3 months, then what you'll get to at the end is that you can do that new bow shoulder really well on blank boss. And,
exactly.
And you'll turn up at a competition and you'll be like, Jesus, it's like I've just stepped back in time. One of the way I describe it with Richard, actually, I'd talk about kind of like an onion metaphor. Like your technique is like the layers of an onion, and when I go to competitions, I tend to find that the outermost layers get peeled off. And so until they've kind of solidified. So I talk about I went backwards 6 months today. I pulled out the April shot instead of the July one, but that's fine. It just shows me where I am. And it goes both ways as well. It means in the competition, not being afraid sometimes to let the shot be what it is. So if whatever I've pulled out the bag on scoring arrow number 1 isn't quite what I've been practicing the last few months, but it can go in the 10 still. Okay, it's time to work with that. I don't have a lot. I can be kind of fussy about it and say, no, I'm only going to try and force my technique to be what I've been training it to be, and sacrifice the score, because inevitably trying to force it to be something different to whatever's kind of coming out the box of your subconscious is going to end poorly. In my experience, it's really hard. Sometimes for a smaller competition, you might do that. You might say, okay, well, I'm going to use this slightly pressured situation to try and force myself to keep the good technique that I've been working on, and that's a great training exercise. But I think it's become a training exercise. It's no longer a competition, because your priority,
conscious thinking.
Yeah, your priority switched from how I score to how I shoot the arrow. And in a real competition, for me, the priority at the end of the day is how I score, and you don't get points for style.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not
Ultimately.
marked like
So
gymnastics.
yeah. If it was gymnastics, it would be a different story, and I'd have probably never got onto the team with the technique I had. I'd kind of taught myself, but I taught myself how to hit the middle somehow.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes. And I think that attitude is pretty crucial if you want to be a really competitive archer. That's just as important to learn that and practice that kind of determination as it is to have good technique.
Yeah, and then also because obviously, like you said before, if you do it all at blank boss, you get good at blank boss. If you don't have that feedback of the target face, you never learn what X shot equates to where it lands.
Yeah.
So that ability needs to vary depending on one person's feeling. It might be slightly different to get a good grouping, but they need to learn individually what their feeling is.
Exactly.
The only way you do that is by shooting a target.
Yeah. There's even an element of sort of pre-competition, something I've been working on more recently in the last sort of few months or so, is the concept of like pre-competition training and just shooting and grouping and seeing where the arrows go, and that's it. Not like necessarily scoring it, not necessarily going for a target, but just looking at where the arrow is and letting my brain learn, if I did this, it went there. If I did this, it went there. And you just kind of accept where the arrows land, see what happens. When you make a mistake, fine, look at it, check it out. Okay, it went there. And now you know a little bit more. Yeah. And you might just be able to save it next time and compensate in some way. Or you might realise that something's happening and come down and do the shot. Again, whatever your strategy is for dealing with that. But I think it gives you a better chance of kind of producing your best shot. And it's when you get to a competition, you can't change a bad arrow once you've shot it. So your best tactic is just to, psychologically just to accept it and move on. You can get angry about it if you like, but that's got limited
good luck.
Limited success rate.
Yeah, exactly. Do you ever play the game where you shoot the arrow? Because I find this is a really good drill for giving yourself that kind of learning where the shot's going to go. You know, the drill where you shoot, close your eyes, or even just
try
say out
say
loud
where it is. Yeah.
Before it hits.
Yeah, I have done that. For me,
do you find it useful or not really?
I tend to just go with looking at it. Like, I think that's a way of explicitly sort of forcing yourself to do the same thing. I guess to me, I'm used to training this way already. I'm used to doing a lot of kind of competitive practice, so I'm already kind of in the habit of feeling where the shot went as I've shot it. So I kind of know pretty immediately, okay, was that going central or was it going off? Like I can see by the arrow flight, and I can kind of tell normally, and then I'll look through the scope in a competition to confirm, because kind of the one that really catches you out is when it all feels really good and you're predicting it's gone squack in the middle, and then you look through the scope and it's not, and you go, hang on a minute.
I don't know what you mean. I've never had that. Yeah, I wish. Yeah, that's funny. I'm sure everyone can relate to that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And but sometimes it really stands out. Like, one of the strong memories I have from a competition is the 2017 selection shoot, and this is where I got onto the team for the World Championships for the first time. And one of the guys in the qualifying round shot 888, 888 in an X-sized group at the top of the target, and you're thinking, God damn it, look at your scope. Like, that's 60 points, and you've got a 48 for it. Right there,
that wasn't me, was it?
No, it wasn't.
I can't remember. No, that's all right then.
It wasn't. But I was just kind of like, as a competitor, you're looking at it thinking that's unforgivable.
Just thrown away. Yeah.
You've thrown away 10 points in a field where 10 points could move you 4 places out of the 8 people there. It was tight. It was a lot of people around about the same score, and that made the difference ultimately. So I get the logic of not always scoping every arrow in training, because you can get too caught up into the feedback of where the arrow is and distracted from the process of what you're doing. And even in competition, I might kind of look if I want to confirm, but then if I shoot the next arrow and it feels good as well, and I know the conditions haven't changed, then I'm kind of happy to assume that that's going to go in the
Yeah.
middle as well. And I can just kind of work on that assumption until something makes me think otherwise. Okay, wait, the wind's changed, so that still felt good. So let's have a look
Yeah.
at where that went. Did it drift anymore? No, it's still all right. Okay, I can just keep going.
Yeah.
Or I feel something different. And even if I feel like I've shot a bad one, then, you know, depending on the circumstances, I can choose what to do with that. I can look at it and check where it's gone if I need to know
Yeah.
something else as well. So like, okay, that was a bit dodgy, but
Okay.
also the wind changed. So like, how much of it being on the right is the wind and how much is me?
Yeah.
You know, you've got to. It's not either or. It wasn't just
Yeah.
like that was a bad shot. It's in the 7.
Yeah.
It could have been a right 9, which is acceptable, and then the wind's drifted it 2 more rings, which I've not
Yeah.
caught.
So how much was actually you?
Yeah, how much was it a bad shot, and how much was it, a combination? If you've got to be competent at picking both things out. I think for target outdoor archery, that is the real fine margin where I think competitions are decided between people of pretty similar skill levels.
Yeah.
It's those who can manage the kind of concentration and the prediction of what's happening in the environment the best that come out on top.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. When you're shooting, say in a competition scenario or even in practice, do you have, because obviously you mentioned you need to know where stuff goes, do you have specific things that for you tend to mean an impact on, a specific area?
Absolutely.
So say, like, what are your kind of things, if that makes sense? So like, what happens if you have a group that starts going right? What do you think then? Okay, that means I'm doing this. What do you have for, like? Have you got a couple?
So I guess my goal is to catch it before it becomes a group.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Like one or 2 arrows in a different direction. That's normally the wind changing, and that's aiming off is usually my quick and dirty answer for that, because it's just the fastest way. And when I'm really on it and really confident, I can just pick different spots on the target and aim there and kind of just get into that loop of like predicting the wind and then shooting it and then be like, that's the most satisfying. When it's individual arrows due to a form thing, I tend to have a couple of ones, like arrows going left is a particular one that really used to kind of bite me. In the past, I remember kind of like that had actually got to the point where it got so ingrained that I looked at some footage of me shooting the qualifying round from the World Championships in Mexico, which again is just part of that story of being way above my head, really, like out of my pay grade at that kind of tournament. And I came back and I was like, that end, I felt one where I just dropped my arm instead of bringing it back round, and then I looked at the video footage later, and actually all of them I did that. It's just one of them I did it more. So it's like, I see. It's become so. I was under so much pressure that I was just doing it constantly. So everything was already going left, and then I had the occasional one that went extra left because of it. But it does. So it does vary over time. Like that used to really be a thing I had to watch out for in competitions for like a 2-year period, and I kind of smashed it into submission eventually, and now it's different things, and they're becoming smaller and smaller. So I'd say really one of the things that's been kind of odd for me in the last 12 months or so is that actually my technique's kind of getting towards the finished article now, and it's pretty clean and it looks pretty good from the outside. So when I get arrows just like not quite hitting the middle, I'm never actually that sure what it is.
Really, it's just the general kind of grouping. So
it tends to come down to me. I'm quite consistent. One of my strengths in competition is that like I often used to do well at like national tournaments and stuff, not by shooting the best scores, but just by not dropping down very much. So like
having that steady.
I just turn up and shoot 640, 650. Every week, like week in, week out. And that was enough to then keep doing that kind of thing through the head-to-heads, and when someone would have a bit of a wobble, I'd get past them. And it was that. That's definitely sort of the way I played, and I've improved upon that to kind of, in 2019, I was regularly sort of 660s to 670, and I could just churn that out, shoot after shoot, and I didn't have the like super jazzy, like. Here's like a 118 dozen very often. It could still happen, but for the most part, I just kind of ground things out by being pretty consistent. So for me, the big one is just shrinking the group a little bit. When I'm on a really good day, it's the difference between getting like 54s, 55s to 56s and 57s.
Yeah.
And that's just that little bit of compression of the group is what like puts 10 points onto my score. So I'm still working that one out. I don't have all the answers yet.
Yeah, and this is why we love archery, right?
It never stops. Like, that's one thing people often ask me. Like with indoors, I really like indoor archery. I think partly because I did so much of it when I was learning and starting out, and they said, "Don't you get bored of hitting the 10?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, why would I get bored of hitting the 10?
Yeah,
it gets more interesting the more times I hit the 10. Like once I get to the point on Portsmouth where it's like, okay, I'm on my 18th, 19th, 20th 10 in a row. Can I keep the streak going? And no matter what you do, no matter how good your sort of psychological coping mechanisms, you will get a little bit more sort of into it, and your heartbeat will increase, and you will be sort of trying that bit harder the more 10s you shoot in a row. It's awesome. Like, I can't think of something more fun than that, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, well, in that scenario, what's the kind of so what are the key things you would have to focus on? Say you had talked about the group being kind of slightly wide and just bringing that in, the difference between the okay competitions and the great ones. What is that for you that really makes the difference? Like Pareto's law, the kind of 20-80 law.
Yeah.
So what's that kind of 20% of things that gives you the 80% of good shots?
I think for me, it's a lot about concentration and focus. I think whenever I come to a competition, the technique is whatever it is at that point in time, even it used to be the case, less so now as I get more consistent and I've had a sort of stable technique for longer and been changing stuff less and less often. It used to be, whatever technique turns up on the day, that's what it is. However fit I am on the day, that's how fit I am. I can't change those things anymore. But what I can do is concentrate. Really it's about concentrating on the right thing. And again, what that is different day to day. But I've definitely found over time that my very best performances come from almost a kind of Zen state of not concentrating on anything specific at all, but just looking at the target, being completely sort of absorbed into it and focusing on it, and then just feeling the process of shooting. So I was thinking about this a bit earlier, and my best analogy is like sprinting down a steep rocky hillside, right? If you do that, there is no space in your head to think about anything. You cannot think about what should I have for breakfast tomorrow while you're sprinting down a hill, because you're just thinking foot, and trying not to fall over. I think for me that's the kind of ideal state to shoot in, really. I'm just looking at the 10 and just feeling the process of shooting and getting into that loop. So
I think that's really important, because what you said there is really interesting. Feeling as the word, because I think there's this kind of two sides the way I look at it, either thinking or feeling. And if you're in the thinking mode, that's very much the conscious, I'm working on my technique, I'm trying to change something, which often, and I've been guilty of this many times as well, in a competition is often very easy to go to, especially if things don't go well. If you can stay in that feeling, however, you can do it for yourself. If you can stay in that feeling mode, and effectively what you're doing there is grounding yourself in the present, aren't you?
Yeah,
if you can stay in that mode.
Exactly. Yeah. And even just taking sort of lifting aspects straight out of like meditation and mindfulness, I find really applicable. So I've had competitions before where I won't necessarily have a shot routine to run through as such. I won't be thinking hand hook. That's too much conscious thought for me sometimes. But before the shot, having a routine of standing on the line, and oftentimes I'll go full in. I'll close my eyes, take a deep breath in, take a deep breath out. Maybe just sort of imagine my weight flowing into the floor. And then look at the target, and then it's trying to set everything up right just before the shot, so that once I look at the target, there's kind of nothing else left to do. That's the ideal, and it doesn't. It's not always possible. So my kind of backup plan is to have one thing that I focus on. So this this applies more if I can't get out of my own head while I'm shooting, or if I have changed something recently and it's still quite variable, to pick sort of one element. So I can still, and it changes again over time, but I remember like a national indoors where I shot really well, and I was like, all I was focusing about was where this elbow was, and that was just my whole thing for the day, and everything else has to be trusted to be automatic. So if I'm focusing where this elbow is, I can't control where the grip is pressing into my bow hand. I can't do both of those at once. So I have to trust whatever I'm feeling here is right, and just focus on this bit. And even the magical thing when you get into that state and it works properly is you can make mistakes somewhere else, and the rest of you compensates for it. So I'll be shooting and I think, that's, I could feel that's not quite right, but it seems kind of okay to carry on, and then I shoot and it still goes to a 10, and you think, now we're cooking. That's absolutely, that kind of shooting well is kind of characterized by a feeling of like, I can get away with anything and still get 10s. That's my other kind of good shooting mode. So I've got a couple of ways of doing it, really. But those are the two most successful that I've experienced.
That's really good. And I think it's really interesting as well, because effectively what's happening there is your subconscious is doing micro corrections, isn't it? When you're focusing on, maybe the draw elbow or something, something doesn't feel right on the front, your brain is doing micro corrections. But if you were in that thinking mode instead, and you were trying to go through too much of a checklist of like, is my hand here? Is my hand here?
You can't make
your brain would not do those micro corrections.
No, you can't do it. And I think I had to learn that because I didn't have a consistent technique for a large part. So because I learned as an adult, and because I picked it up and I picked up all these habits and different ways of doing things, I was just trying to shoot 10s. I wasn't trying to make a solid, repeatable, efficient technique. So actually what I was doing was inefficient and difficult to repeat. So the only way I could shoot well was to let the subconscious kind of clean up the mess for me as such. It had to, because that was the only way I could shoot 10s. So I kind of happened upon that by accident, and now find that it's still really useful, even as I can clean up the technique, and that the improved technique just makes it physically easier. It means I can shoot more in training. I can do more repetitions because it's not as tiring. But still fundamentally, it's still the subconscious, I think, that makes stuff work for me. So that's where all the credit's got to go. I'm just the guy on the outside, but that's the one that actually like does the things for me. So interesting. And I know you mentioned about mindfulness and meditation earlier. Do you do, is there a specific type of meditation you do, or do you do it generally, and do you find that helpful? So I've had patches of doing it. I was introduced to the concept by at the university. At one point in the uni club, I was kind of stepping up a bit as like a team captain, and I was organising things like S&C sessions, and I can't remember how I got in contact with her in the first place, but we got in contact with a clinical psychologist, so she did this mindfulness kind of practice with patients with chronic pain in hospital settings, but she was really interested to see what would happen if you tried it in sports. So she wasn't a sports psychologist, but she was a psychologist who found the sport interesting, and she would it started off, she would just run some group sessions with us, and we'd all kind of rock up into a seminar room somewhere on campus in the evening and like have a bit of a talk through things, and then she'd do a little kind of scripted guided meditation session, and we'd all kind of like close our eyes in the chairs, and then exactly, and then it would end and you'd all be like, oh god, I'm so relaxed. What do I do now? But that was my sort of introduction to it, and at points I've like used like apps and stuff with scripts on them. I don't have like a fixed routine of it. I don't kind of say like every day I do this, but I just try to remember it as an option. As the more years have gone by that it's been sort of as available as a thing in my life. I just try and remember, okay, when I'm standing around and I've got like something in the microwave for 40 seconds and I reach for my phone, I go, hey, hang on a minute. I can just
why am I
wait. I could just breathe for 40 seconds and, the boredom isn't going to kill me. It's okay.
No.
And it's really useful.
That micro bit is good, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's just, I'm not perfect at it by any means, and I could probably be more structured with how I do it, but it's becoming a habit at times. And I find it's really useful for travel, especially. So, like, queuing in airports, waiting to get on and off planes, it's a great chance to sort of practice it, and especially just before a competition is a good time. So the other thing I was
going to ask next.
The other thing I'll use it for is like pre-competition nerves as well. That's a good way to kind of settle down. So either it's go do something physical, like go for a run, go lift some weights or whatever, to burn off the energy, or just to do that is a good option as well, because it kind of leaves you feeling more rested than when you started, as compared to like trying to distract yourself with something like going on Facebook or playing a game or whatever. So especially in competition, that's the most important time, really. So between ends, I'm always I never read a book or do a crossword or look at my phone in a competition. It is once I've started, even if it's double detail, double 720 all day, I will just like sit down in the chair and just kind of be focused on shooting until it's over, really. And I won't pick up my phone, or do anything useful like that. And if I've got like a deadline to meet, then if I didn't do it before the start of the competition, it's not getting done till after. That's kind of non-negotiable for me. That's the way I operate. It's got to be like full focus on what I'm doing until it's over. So
I think that's really interesting, because I think, obviously different people need different things in competition, but I think what everyone can learn from that is, even if, some people might want to do a crossword or whatever they do, there does need to be some element of what you're doing there with having some space, that mindfulness space in between ends or at the lunch break, that kind of thing, because it's too tempting to shoot your arrows, come off the line, kind of, you're still thinking, okay, what happened there? Where am I shooting? Then maybe pull out your phone, go on Facebook, and then you're not giving yourself any space. At some point, you need the space.
You need to process
to do that.
Yeah. Again, it's your subconscious doing the work for you. So if it's not got any time, if you're just, because a competition is like an onslaught of information. I always talk about the brain drain after a competition, and that's normally. Not so much this year, obviously, but normally we'd if you go to a restaurant afterwards and you look at the menu and the words just go through your eyeballs and out the other side, and you just find yourself reading it again and again and again, and you're mentally exhausted. And the only thing I've ever done that's been as mentally exhausting as shooting like full days of competition is writing my thesis. In like 9 years at university, that was the only thing that did the same effect of completely draining all of my mental energy at the end of the day. So like a 72 arrow competition is physically looks similar to a 72 arrow training session, but the mental load is
not, is it?
What, 5-10 times higher? It must be. You're not that tired after a training session, but you're concentrating so hard in a competition. And like you say, if you just throw more information at your brain in the breaks, it's
and that includes
it's a lot of work to do. Some people it might work better for than others. I think some people process competition in a different way, and they actually try and almost don't focus so hard, and just for them the thing is to make it like a training session and just shoot arrows and shoot groups and not process that much information on each, and not try and work out why that's gone well. Just try and almost pretend it's not a competition, and that's how they shoot best. I've never been able to get into that state. I'm competitive. If you hand me like a bendy bit of bamboo and one wooden arrow, I will try and hit the middle with it. Like, it's just not I don't know how to not be competitive. So for me, I'm always going to be, I know I'm going to be running on maximum in that environment.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to kind of conserve mental energy in the parts in between.
Yeah. And I think regardless of whether someone wants to distract themselves so that they feel a bit more relaxed, like you said, or maybe the approach that you do, I think the common thing from them is that they're both methods to basically limit the input. So your method is to limit, you know yourself well, so you need to limit the input of external irrelevant information, whereas other people might need something to distract them to limit themselves of the internal input, that they might have the internal monkey mind, stuff like that. Yeah. And it's about limiting that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think I've seen something recently talking about like kind of the neuroscience of just seeing. Yeah. And there was a visualization of the brain, and it kind of showed like information traveling from the eyes up the optic nerve as kind of like, you know, futuristic flashes of light and stuff. But then it showed from the prefrontal cortex to the same part of the brain that receives that raw information. Something like 5 times as much information coming from within your own brain, telling your brain what is it going to see, what are you expecting to see, what are the patterns, and that's, you know, all those things, all the optical illusions, all the shortcut skim reading, like everything you can do with your vision. So much of it or even just the fact that it looks like a continuous steady film when actually it's like a choppy, hazy, full of blind patches stitched together.
Blurry on the outside.
Bit of information. That's all done by your brain internally. So I imagine there's a much the same process going on in shooting, where it on the outside you don't think it's that much. You know, it's movements and stuff that you practiced before, but there's a huge amount of information going on and recirculating inside your head to get that absolute fine precision. That means you know, you can control the position of your hands in space at the moment the arrow leaves the bow to within fractions of a millimeter. Is, you know, there's no way you can do that not shoot. Like if you're an archer and that's your skill, and then you try and like hold a laser pointer steady on a target at 70 meters, you're going to be absolutely all over the shop. And that should be easier, right? It's so much of it is that really fine-tuned feedback. So it's really, you got to respect the brain, I think. It's what we get away from that. I guess I've not actually sort of explicitly worded that out before, but thinking through it kind of makes sense to me.
No, absolutely, What kind of going back a little bit into what you were saying about pre-competition, and then I guess afterwards that kind of brain drain that you mentioned, what would you say are some kind of some things that maybe work for you, or some things that you would recommend if archers that are watching want to, I guess, prepare better for a competition, maybe those pre-competition nerves, and they want to prepare for like a pressure situation, and then also how do they then recover to then, you know, go to the next one? Because I think most people around the world have, you know, a lot of the competitions, obviously not this year, but hopefully next year, fingers crossed, but a lot of the competitions are in the summer, and they can kind of be like back to back, and then it's hard to get the recovery, and then there's this whole winter that's left to then prepare, but then there's nothing to actually prepare with. So it's about,
so how do you prepare?
How do you balance?
It's difficult. I think that there's not much substitute for doing it. And I think one of the best things you could do in the winter is to try and find some situation, be it a competition or be it just some environment you set up in your training where you make a bet with someone, or like you video yourself shooting or something, but something that raises the stakes and pushes you out of your comfort zone. And then you can kind of control when that is and try different things and see how you respond to it. And it's really hard to learn these things without actually kind of getting your hands dirty and doing it in the field. But in terms of just general sort of pre-competition, I think, again, a lot of it comes from familiarity. So if you've done a certain level of competition, you know, the first time I went to a World Cup, I kind of like left the shooting line, jelly legs and everything. I was completely like, it was such an overwhelming experience just doing the qualifying round. So by the time I got to my first match, I had nothing left. I was completely smashed in that, and I called that a baptism of fire. And then having done like over 10 of them now, I kind of rock up at a World Cup and go, it's a World Cup.
This is what I do.
This is not. Oh, good, we're back. Here we go.
Yeah.
So that you can't beat that kind of familiarity with the environment. And I get that
Yeah.
you can't do it for everything. Like it's pretty hard to get that with an Olympic Games, right? But
Yeah.
you know,
That's the trick,
if
isn't
you're
it?
turning
Yeah.
up to you're trying to, you've got to, I guess, practice turning up at things that are out of your depth and
Yeah.
seeing how you respond to them. I think it varies so much person to person, but don't take a restrictive view on it, I guess, is the only advice
Yeah.
I give. Like, consider everything. Consider, how do you sleep beforehand? How do you eat? Do you do better
Yeah.
traveling early and having time once you arrive to settle and acclimatize, or do you want to
Yeah.
just get there and get straight into it? Um, Thinking about what you're doing between training sessions and between competitions. Like, a lot of the time, you go to these things, and the social aspect of it is really important, and
Yeah.
that's great. But it's kind of knowing, okay, if I choose to go for this meal out with everyone,
Yeah.
they're going to stay out until the wee hours of the morning, and I'm not going to have
Yeah.
much sleep. So I've got to know right away, does this competition mean enough to me that I'm, where does it rank in my priorities? Do I choose
Yeah.
to go with them but have a strict, I'm leaving at this time and I'll wave goodbye to you guys, and even when they're all going, oh, it's a party pooper,
Yeah.
at the moment you're leaving, you've already decided that's what you're doing, and no one's going to give you shit for it tomorrow. It's just at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or do I not go at all, and do I just get ready sort of in my own space and find food somewhere else? So
Yeah.
the answers come with practice, but it's just coming from
Definitely.
thinking about it kind of holistically beforehand.
Yeah. Would you do visualization as well in terms of, say, I know it's hard obviously because it's hard to visualize somewhere that you haven't been.
Yeah.
But do you do that kind of contingency visualization, people call it, don't they, where they visualize, going to the field and their equipment breaks, so they have to use a new pair of limbs or something. Do you do that kind of stuff with the visualization, or not as much?
So sometimes I think I like to go to the field, and even if it's just like on the morning of the shoot itself, but just one of the first things I'll do is I'll arrive, kind of dump my stuff down, and just walk over to the shooting line and look at the targets. And it doesn't have to be like this really formal, scripted sort of thing, but I'm just absorbing the environment and getting used to it.
Yeah.
And then when I go back up there to start the competition, I'll feel a bit more comfortable with it. Definitely, that's an element of the subconscious, I think, playing its part again, because I'm sure our caveman brain is still doing this whole like scanning the environment for new things and threats. So
Absolutely.
if you're in an unfamiliar environment, you are on alert and picking up all the differences. But if you can familiarize yourself with it and feel safe, then your brain can relax a little bit.
And that's what you see a lot of people doing, isn't it? With I guess you might see this night before, or like you say in the morning. It's very common. Like I like doing it as well. Maybe going to the field if it's somewhere I haven't been, sitting there for like a few minutes, looking at the field, and then when I go back to like the night before, when I'm preparing for the next day, visualize going there in the morning, setting my bow up, shooting a few arrows, shooting practice, and visualizing that you're at that place. Is really useful.
I think it's really powerful. I think if you can get into the habit of doing it more, then it's almost never going to hurt, I think. Definitely on occasions, like the selection shoot in 2019, I did a lot beforehand. I did a little bit of kind of scripted stuff as well, kind of talking through just the process of kind of shooting like 6 arrows, but describing the environment as well. And it was at Antalya, which is a place I know really well now, and I've been there a lot of times, so I've got that kind of familiarity with it. So I can conjure up the mental image of it and feel sort of at home there straight away. I think, this is a good place to do archery. I think the visualization then helps build that positive association as well, because you've just it feels like you've been there more times. In terms of actually kind of robustly rehearsing the shot process itself, that I find really difficult. But again, I think it comes back to what we're talking about with the shot routine and the what I focus on in competition. And because what I focus on is almost just the present moment and what's happening now, and not very detailed about what I'm doing, it's really hard for me to reconstruct what I'm doing in my head. So I've tried it various times, and I still play with it occasionally, but I don't sweat the fact that I find it really difficult, because
Yeah.
I don't think that particular aspect kind of applies to me in the same way as it would
Yeah.
to those who have a more kind of robust shot routine.
Yeah.
There's so many different
Yeah.
ways of doing things.
There.
It's
Yeah.
really, really hard. All I can do is just talk about what works for me so
Yeah.
far, and I
Yeah.
change my mind on things
I
over
was gonna
time
say,
as
yeah,
well.
and that
So
evolves, doesn't
absolutely,
it?
yeah. And people
Yeah.
come back to me and are like, "Why don't you do this anymore?" I'm like, well, because I don't think it works that good anymore. Why did you do it at the time? Because I thought it worked good at the time.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to trick you or anything. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to get the best
You
results
hooligan.
I can. Yeah.
How dare you change your mind?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's funny. So with that, I guess kind of going on to a little bit more like technical aspect. I know obviously you mentioned the other day, you mentioned you worked through an injury, kind of you're working through an injury at the moment, or
Yes.
coming at the tail end of that. So I guess first of all, can you describe just very roughly what the injury was and maybe what you think caused it, and then where you are now in the kind of rehab stage, and going back to shooting, and how that's been. I mean, it's been a difficult year anyway obviously with COVID and everything. So working through an injury is always a bit self-isolating, even without something like COVID. So I can imagine that's been pretty difficult from a mental point of view as well. So I think that'll be really interesting for a lot of people.
Yeah, so it's something that's been ongoing really for about 2 years now. Been giving me problems on and off in patches, but essentially I got knocked off my bike going onto campus on a roundabout, and I landed kind of on my hands. I didn't think anything of it at the time. My foot was kind of sprained, and I had like a bruise on the bone, and walking was painful for a few months. But turns out that was small fry. I could deal with that all right. What happened after that is that I started getting a ganglion in my wrist forming on the top side, and whenever it got compressed like this, it would really hurt. And
so sorry to butt in. For anyone that doesn't know, a ganglion is like a bag of fluid under the skin, basically. It's kind of anyone who's medical will probably hate that description. Sorry if I butchered that. But
basically just inflammation.
Yeah.
Inflammation that would build up in one spot and wouldn't go away. It was super painful. And I've had it treated a couple of times, and it's worked or it hasn't worked at various points. I had a bit of a 10-month streak of it being all right in 2019, which was kind of good timing, because that was enough time for me to train and then go through that season of qualifying Olympic spaces and everything. But it's kind of come back with a bit of a vengeance over the last winter. And because it's been on and off for so long, it had actually kind of caused chronic inflammation of the whole lining of the joint. So it got to the point where I could only move my hand sort of that much instead of that much.
And this is the bow hand, isn't it, by the way?
This is the bow hand, So this is a
Yeah.
problem for classic sort of shooting position, because you have to bend it back. And then after you shoot, even worse, it then has to fall forwards, and that whole bit gets stretched out. And because it was so stiff, I couldn't stretch out. So it was super painful after the shot as well, when the bow went and rolled away. So I've had to.
Not really what you want, is it?
No.
Something to make you flinch, basically. Pretty
much, because it just sets you on guard. Yeah, it's absolutely the sort of antithesis of the whole being in the moment kind of mindset, philosophy, and feeling what's happening when you're just focusing on pain and trying to avoid it.
You don't want to feel that kind of thing.
Messes up your concentration. So I changed a few things. I played about with the bows and made them roll less, but there's limits to what you can do with that, because actually I've never made a neutral setup sort of work for me. So by bringing all the, putting the drop bars and bringing all the weights back and everything, and having the bow set up upright after it shoots, okay, great, it doesn't roll, but it also doesn't really group. So I'm just there kind of spraying,
a bit too much of a
spraying
compromise.
9s and 8s and thinking, this doesn't work. So that it was an honest idea. I tried it, but it went out the window. I've kind of changed how I hold the bow, so I've rotated my hand 90 degrees, so it's now kind of vertical rather than up like this, which actually means my bow arm as well is elbow facing up and a bit pointing out. Actually, I've always struggled to rotate it anyway, so to just let go and have it like that is actually a bit easier for me. So in some ways that kind of fits with my body shape a little bit better anyway. And I'm lucky that I get string clearance without having to rotate.
Even with that.
So by leaving it facing up, it's a little bit stronger at the shoulder joint and actually don't get compressed as much. So that's one where textbook kind of goes out the window in favor of, okay, well, what works practically right now is more important.
I was going to say textbook is great if you can, if you're not in pain.
If you can
you can't do it, then it's useless.
Just in the last couple of months, really, I've had it treated again with a steroid injection, which is number 3 so far. But kind of hoping that this one works. It does now move again, which is a really good sign. And I'm now just really focused on the rehab and building the strength back up in the wrist, because I've been avoiding using it for so long. I've taken all my gym exercises and been doing it with elastic bands kind of tied around the elbow rather than lifting weights.
So removed.
I've just removed stress from it for so long that actually now it's just really weak. So it's been a case of building the strength back up. And for now I'm on very, very low numbers, lightweight bows for the time being. And it's just, I don't know how long it's going to take me to build back up. I don't know exactly when I'll get back up to like a sort of competitive poundage or what that poundage will be. But it almost is pointless kind of worrying about it in too much detail, because it will be whatever it is.
Yeah, you just have to take it step by step, don't you?
Yeah, and I've got from now until March for another selection shoot. And my job is just to be competitive when I get there. Whatever state I'm in physically. I'm kind of optimistic that stuff will go well, and I'll be able to sort of do more training as I get closer to it. But I think that's another one where the psychological almost dominates the physical, because I still feel confident that I can do it. And even recently, I had like a month of no shooting at all after the injection, and I've picked the bow back up and done my first couple of sessions with it, and both times at the end of the session, like 3 arrow ends, I've been kind of like got onto that flow of just hitting the middle and nailing it and thinking, this is all right. I still
Gives
know
you
what I'm doing.
a bit more confidence, doesn't it?
I know what I'm doing.
Still do it.
Exactly. So that's where I'm at with it, really. So it's had big impacts on my shooting and training the last 2 years, and it's constantly been a case of kind of compromising around it, and working out, okay, ideally I would do this, but for practical limitations, what can I actually do is more important. But I don't think it's affected me competitively too much, because I've still kind of taken the view with myself that I can still turn up to a competition and I can still shoot a good arrow, and then I can still shoot a good arrow on the next one. So
and it's a case of just making sure that obviously you have that training when you can, and then have enough rest and recovery so that you don't, overload it too much and that kind of thing. Do you think it was a case of like overload that caused it, or was it something mainly from that? Because obviously the bike accident is the kind of acute.
I think that was the initial cause, and just sort of kind of, it's the reason it's persisted for so long. I think has been just not always getting the balance right, and it's really tricky because we're always trying to get the most out of ourselves, and especially it's come at a time as I've just gone. I've left uni. I've gone full time into training. I'm there at the Lush Hall 5 days a week. I've got the coaches are writing these programs for me to try and get me as physically fit and strong as I can be, and when I can do that, the physical results are awesome. I can shoot a really heavy bow. I've got a load of control, and then I combine that with my competitiveness and my improved technique, and it really all fits together, and it is good. But I think we're just kind of sometimes a little bit too caught up in the rush. You're like, this year Olympic qualifying, only 5 months to go, only 4 months to go. Like, we have to train, we have to get ready now, which is true. But just kind of,
it's hard.
It's so hard because with something like this, it's an inflammatory thing. It's not like it always hurt while I was shooting. Actually, what would usually happen is it would be really stiff and it would hurt a lot for the first few arrows. and then it was settled
I've
in.
had something similar, yeah.
Yeah,
And then you think, oh, it's not bad anymore.
And you think, okay, I can work with this. And now that it doesn't feel any different to shoot 50 arrows or 250. So you keep going and you shoot the arrows, right? And then 1 or 2 days later, you're like,
yeah,
that,
maybe
not good. But it's too late.
Yeah.
You've kind of done the damage by then. So the only way to really avoid that is to be super aggressive in your backing off of the training and deloading, which is then, it takes a lot of kind of cojones to say, okay, I've got a selection shoot in 12 weeks and I'm going to shoot 50 arrows this week.
It doesn't probably go down too well sometimes.
That's really, you got to have a lot of confidence in yourself that you can pull it out at the other end. That you don't need to be shooting a lot now. So trying to find that balance has been really difficult. But I think it is getting better, and as I'm, at the very least, as I'm getting more self-aware and getting used to managing it, I'm getting better at sort of picking up on these things quicker and sort of preempting it a little bit. I think it's one of those ones where, because I never shot a lot of arrows, that's one of the things in my progression, all the way from like starting out as a novice to getting onto the national team. I didn't do it by super huge arrow numbers and like kind of repetition ingraining of the shot. I did it by that kind of subconscious corrections process we talked about, and just trying different bits of technique and implementing things, and by bringing a lot of focus and attention to my training. So I'll usually be the last one back from the targets in a training session. I don't get how everyone shoots so quickly. I was like, oh, they're all waiting for me again. And everyone's like, Tom's just really slow. I'm always the last person to pack up my bag and leave the session, because I'm still in the moment, kind of trying to figure out what happened and like, what was that feeling there? What could I try differently next time? So it's lucky for me, I guess, that I didn't have to shoot a lot of arrows to get good initially, because that means when I can't shoot a lot of arrows because of an injury, I'm not so sort of psyched out by it. As it would be if I was someone who needed to shoot huge numbers of arrows to kind of get the results. I know I don't want to rely on that. You always want to do everything in your power. But I've got confidence that whichever way this goes, be it stuff recovers really quickly and I can train loads, or it doesn't. I can only do what I can to control the things that I can control, and however it comes out, I'll have to try and get a performance at the end of it anyway. So there's almost no point worrying about it.
Exactly. And I think this is really interesting, because this is something I wanted to touch on with, so I don't know how many years I'd been on the squad, but I'd seen a lot of people. So I'd been on the team for like, I don't know how many years, whatever. I'd been there for a while and seen a lot of people come onto the team and then basically maybe start making some changes, maybe start shooting a lot of arrows very suddenly that they hadn't shot. So they might go from shooting 400 arrows a week to 300 arrows a day or something. Just huge increases. But it was very interesting for me to see when you came onto the squad, it was a very different approach. And in terms of, so for me at that time, I maybe was shooting, I don't know, 300-400 a day or something. And then maybe your approach was basically a lot fewer arrows and more other things, like you were saying about so a couple of things that I saw from externally, more quality focus. So really making sure, and this is what you said just before, isn't it? Really making sure literally every single arrow you're basically inputting something into your brain, aren't you? Every single arrow, you're making sure that like, okay, what does this mean here? Rather than just shoot. And I think at the time I was guilty of this. I'll be like, oh yeah, I've shot 200 arrows, but really I've shot 200 arrows at blank boss, literally just throwing arrows at a blank target.
That's
and I might
thing.
Have
And I think you can focus on, like, it's not just what you're doing. Like, I think you can focus on blank boss. It's just taking the kind of mental step to take the time between each arrow and to focus on what you're doing. And just because you're not getting the target feedback, so it's a bit less information, but you can still get all the feedback internally of what you felt. So
absolutely.
Alex Wise has said that to me before. He said, like, you shoot blank boss properly. Which is the same kind of thing what you're getting at, I think. And I get that it's definitely easy to fall into the kind of more is more. Because if you can do more arrows with focus and concentration, and you can physically recover from them, yes, you will get better.
All things
more is more,
I guess, but
it's kind of double checking: is the more I'm doing actually more in this case, or am I now just shooting arrows for the sake of shooting arrows?
I think that happens a lot.
Yeah, it's really easy to do, and if the only thing you're doing is just working on sort of physical conditioning, and that's the approach you've taken, and you want to build your endurance by having a period where you shoot a load of arrows, then I don't even necessarily think it's a bad thing, but you've got to know,
because that's the goal, isn't it?
You've got to know why you're doing it and for what period of time. So if I might say, like, okay, actually I'm fit, I'm competent now, I want to increase the number of arrows I shoot for endurance, so that I can then do more in competition and in kind of scoring practice. So say I'm only doing like 800 arrows a week, which is something I kind of end up about there quite often. I do more, I do less. 800 arrows a week for me is a good kind of competition season quantity. If I want to do more, then to kind of prepare myself for doing more in training and keeping the quality, then I can prepare myself physically first by doing an extra 200, 300 arrows of perhaps lower concentration, but just getting that kind of physical capacity in first, and then step the quality up afterwards. It's all, I don't have the answers on it. Again, it's still stuff I'm figuring out, and I'm limited on my ability to play with it at the moment, because it's just like the pure endurance repetition approach is not open to me right now, so there's no point kind of worrying about it. But when it is, it's something I like to kind of consider. How can I get the most out of doing like high numbers of arrows? I think you've just got to bring, for me, I've just got to bring sort of maximum attention to every arrow I shoot most of the time, and that's what helps me, really.
And I think that's something I see oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I feel like I can't quite remember what my original point was. But
no, that works well. Because I think I see that a lot with I see the temptation is very much, a lot of the top archers shoot X amount of arrows. Maybe, you might hear that Korean archers shoot 500 arrows a day. So then people are like, oh, I must shoot 500 arrows a day. But what they don't realise is, A, they've spent 15 years building up to that volume, starting with a band. So their body, even not just muscles, talking about tendons, bones, ligaments, have had time to adapt over this period. And then also they are mentally able to focus on that number of arrows as well, for the same reason. But if you just do that, you're just going to be mind blank and not learning anything from it. So I'd much rather I think people could learn a lot from your approach of less is more in terms of the arrow numbers, but making sure the arrows are good, high quality arrows. Because I think 95% of maybe club or national level archers are, at the same time, they're overtrained because they're trying to shoot too many arrows, and they're under the level that they need to be in terms of strength. So it's like they're consistently overtrained and never strong enough. It's
a double whammy. Absolutely. And even on top of that as well, in the long term, if you think about, okay, well, I'm gonna make myself shoot 2 times as many arrows. If you're doing that from a place of kind of external motivation, where you're doing that because you see someone else doing it, or a coach tells you to do it, or you've heard that's what Joe Bloggs is doing, or even just you have decided to do it because you think it will make you better, but you don't actually enjoy the process of shooting them. If you're not intrinsically motivated to shoot that huge increase in numbers of arrows, it's not sustainable. So you'll do it for a period of time, but as soon as it gets to the point where you're regularly getting to the last hour to go of a session and looking at your counter and thinking, only another 100 to go, like you're just on a path to pain at that point, because how is that? That's not going to get easier over time. The more you do it, it's just going to wear you down more and more. Whereas
And that mindset
I think that people,
is just, I mean, yeah.
if you're the people who are successful with a high volume approach, they do it because they freaking love shooting arrows, and
Yeah,
it doesn't
they just can't
feel
get
like
enough of
work
it.
to them. You know, it doesn't always. Obviously, some things feel like hard work. Like you go in the gym and you lift a
Yeah.
heavy weight, it's always going to feel physically hard work. But if you can get yourself into a place where you're doing it because you're motivated to do it and you want to do it, then yeah, the sessions go so much more easily.
Yeah.
And I've been on both sides of that coin at various points. I've
Yeah.
been on the
Yeah,
entirely
same here.
sort of self-motivated improvement train, kind of just plowing along and enjoying every session and getting better and loving it and feeding off that energy. And I've been on the,
Yeah.
right, this is what I need to do, and just getting harder and harder and harder each session. And when you're not
Yeah.
motivated, I think it's hard to bring that quality.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say for someone? I'm just trying to think. Maybe someone who has between an hour and 2 hours each day. So they might have 1 to 2 hours, 5 days a week to shoot, and very much similar to the approach that you took with less volume. What would you say is the best way to get their strength up so they can control the bow, but then also, within that time limit?
Yeah, so I think when you're shooting low volumes, you have to kind of separate like church and state kind of thing. You have to work out, okay, I'm shooting low volumes, so I'm not going to get enough physical conditioning from the volumes I'm shooting. So I have to find some way of getting extra in there. And there's a lot of different options for that. There's the kind of like, okay, I'm going to do gym work to build a foundation. And then you can try and make your gym work really specific as well. And that can have an impact. And you can try and put things in there that are kind of targeting your weak links. And that can help raise your level of conditioning, and you can target endurance or strength in that environment. Or you can make some of your shooting physically stressful. And you can do bow training, or you can do really time compressed shooting, or adding bands, or doing sort of physical training exercises in some of your shooting. So I think you've got to kind of say, within this limited budget of arrows, I can't afford to just rely on that to get me fit. So I've got to find something else that's going to do it. And especially that's where your like periodization of the year comes in, and you've got to choose what periods of time you're going to focus on that. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't compete as well. Especially in my case, I find it more beneficial to keep competing even when I'm doing the kind of hard physical training, because actually the competitions become a little mini physical deload in a way.
Exactly.
I can see where I am, and it might save me a lot of time, because I might go to a competition 6 weeks into a winter of kind of physical development and realize, okay, now what I thought was the weak link isn't the weak link. So rather than spending another 3 months kind of hammering the same thing, I can now switch. I can switch it and work on, prioritize something else. So I could save myself a lot of time that way. It's being efficient, having purpose for your training. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the bow training definitely to get that intensity, because obviously the shooting the arrows, you might do sometimes even 50 arrows in an hour. I think it's very rare people do up to 100 an hour in terms of if it's close range, but normally it's maybe 50 an hour if you're doing long distance.
And it can be much less. Can be much less, especially if you're doing sort of scoring practice or head-to-head practice with 3 hour ends. And you're training in a club environment or with a team of lots of people shooting at once. So it can, we've had times where we've shot like 20 arrows an hour at the national squad.
Exactly.
Because we're doing mixed team practice. So you shoot 2 arrows and then you go collect.
So you need another way to get that physical aspect there, for sure, don't you?
And it's absolutely got its place, because what you gain from that is the kind of quality of concentration on those 2 arrows. You're absolutely kind of putting everything into making those as good as you can, not just for yourself but for your team now. So just because it's low density doesn't mean it's not still really important, but you do have to just be smart about it and think, probably not gonna get as many arrows as I would need this week to increase my fitness. I guess the other thing I would suggest is kind of get familiar with the concept of maintaining versus improving versus regressing, because I see a lot of people make the mistake of, I can't train enough to improve right now, so I'm not going to. And to me, that is just like, oh no, you just, because to regress, if you do nothing, you will slowly sort of regress over time. And if you do lots of hard training, you will slowly improve over time. Assuming you're kind of relatively experienced already, and you've kind of made the most of your beginner sort of development, you're in that kind of plateau phase of building up scores slowly year on year. Like a 5-point increase in your PB is now big. But if you do a little bit of training, you maintain. It's not like a 1, 2, 3. It's like a 1, 2, 20, 30. It's you have
your
to do.
Your body gets used to it, doesn't it?
Yeah. So if you can do a small amount of training, you'll maintain, and it applies if you then break it down into its subcategories. So if you can do physical training at a period of time in a couple of months in the winter, maybe you've chosen a time where you're going to really focus on it. Now, if you do through the summer in your competition season, if you do 50 arrows in a week of the kind of same physical hard conditioning, and you make it intense and difficult, that's not enough to improve. It's not going to push your boundaries and make you stronger, but it's also probably going to stop you getting weaker. So that's super beneficial. You've now created free time to work on other stuff. And rather than needing like 200, 300 hours a week or this many hours of conditioning, you've sliced the amount of time you need right down, but you're still getting the same benefits of it. And now you can focus on your quality shooting or your concentration or your competition skills. So kind of get familiar with that concept and learn, where are your thresholds? How much do you need to do to improve? How much do you need to do maintain? How much do you start sort of decreasing at? And you might be surprised by the kind of answers on that.
What the kind of minimal effective dose is. You might be surprised why it doesn't need to be quite as high as you think.
And it's obviously it's not the most sexy kind of selling point. It's like, just do the minimum. That's not what you come to hear. Like, elite athletes talk about. You want to hear about like pushing yourself to your limits and puking your guts into the bucket at the end of the training session and stuff. But actually, I think beneath the surface for a lot of top level competitors is just a solid foundation of getting the minimum done in every area, and then focusing on what they want to achieve and improve. So if you're getting the minimum done year after year after year, and then doing the extras where you need to improve, that long-term progression is really big compared to just the kind of sort of fallacy of going all in on one particular thing because that's the thing you need to improve and letting other things regress. That's how you can
you've got one strong bit.
Then you're like the kind of Looney Tunes, like spinning your legs in the air, but you've gone over the cliff already and you're not actually making ground. So
it's like you never. It's like when you go to the gym, you don't want to miss leg day, do you? So you want that maintenance. You want the maintenance of every area basically to use.
And it's I say it and sometimes I live it. Like I make the mistakes as well, and many times I've come back into the gym having kind of it's tapered off, and then there's been travel days, and then the competition we went to didn't have a good gym, and then suddenly the next thing I know it's the end of season break and I'm knackered and I just want to like can it all off, and then the next thing I know I've not been in a gym for 4 months and I go and squat and I'm like and now it's going to take me like 2 or 3 months to get back to where I was.
To build it back
up instead of just stepping back on the improvement slope from where I was or even just a little bit below. It's not necessarily like easy to always do this, but if you can kind of keep it in mind in how you plan your training, I think it's really beneficial to think about it in those terms.
It's another thing in your toolbox, isn't it? It's like you said about the mindfulness. Maybe you don't necessarily do it every day, but you've got it already in your toolbox.
Exactly. You
can pick it out.
And I think top level sport, again, it attracts some of those types of personalities that are like absolutely all in 100%, whatever it is that they've seen right now. This is the hottest thing since sliced bread, and I will, like, this will solve all my problems, and I'll go all in on this. And I've never been of that approach. I'm just like, okay, what can I take from this? Okay, yeah, I'll do that bit of it.
There's I
can absorb a little bit, and it's again, I think it's not quite as sort of sexy sounding, but like getting the basics done consistently over time, and being intelligent about what you choose to do in your training, and just constantly sort of reflecting and updating those choices is for me, that's the path to long-term improvement.
Yeah, definitely. For anyone, you just kind of briefly mentioned it earlier, for anyone that's, training a lot, especially aspiring to go to European competitions or, World Cups, that kind of thing, for anyone who's particularly young archers, that kind of thing, you mentioned about an end of season break. Can you just touch on how important that is?
It's undescribably important. Again, it's one of those counterintuitive things. Like, the best thing I think you can do for your archery is to stop doing archery for 2 weeks. Timing matters, so that the best thing. Richard Priestman has a good story about before, whether it was his first World Championships or something, or like a major, either a selection shoot or a World Championships or an Olympics, and someone had told him, take 3 weeks off just before the competition. You'll be so fresh. You'll be all fresh. It'll be so easy. And he thought, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And he turned up at the competition, and he picks up the bow for the first time. Oh, this is so light. And then by the sixth arrow, what am I doing? Oh my god!
So first you feel great.
So timing matters, but at the end of the season, taking a bit of time out, partly because it lets you stop and reflect. You get out of the immediate now looking for improvement, analysing kind of short-term mindset, and it's easy to get into the long-term mindset and think about, okay, well, actually, what worked? What did I do well in training? What didn't I? Why didn't I do these things or not? But also just physically, your body needs a change. Like, archery is just such a repetitive sport. It's asymmetrical. It's one-sided. It's constant loading. It's high effort. It's high numbers. And you adapt to it over time, but if you just do it year after year after year, that's how stuff creeps up on you, and you get overuse injuries,
little niggles and stuff.
Just things that will just be not too bad at first, but just get worse and worse and worse. And I think you come back stronger for it as well. You take the break, you let your body recover.
Absolutely.
And you go do something else. Like, don't like slob on the sofa for 2 weeks, but and it's great to go and just play some sport rather than, especially if you're someone who trains for archery rather than just doing it as a hobby. If you're someone who really is kind of invested into that process of improvement, and it's not just that kind of pure pick up a bow and fling sticks and be amused by it thing that it was when you first picked it up, right? Go play something else. Like, it's great fun.
Go and do all the things you can't do normally because you're too busy.
Exactly. And it stops you. Yeah, that's really important as well. I think that stops you getting kind of resentful. Because people kind of assume that that's another one of these things. Like, it's great sacrifice to be a top level athlete. You have to give up on all this clubbing and partying, and you have to miss all your friends' weddings, and you have to constantly be training every day and going on camps, and you don't have time for other hobbies. And in my experience, most top athletes don't see it that way, because they're just like, well, I'm doing the thing that I enjoy. This is fun.
Why would I do it otherwise?
I chose to do this. Like, no one's holding a gun to my head to make me be here. But even with that, there's still an element sometimes when you're training really hard of kind of you can feel like, if you let it build up over time, that it's kind of taking other options away from you. So to give yourself that break and let yourself do other things, well, okay, now
give
you can
yourself
do them.
the space.
So definitely,
I think
absolutely, 100% recommend that everyone
have a
has a break. How long it
yeah
is, I don't know. That depends a bit on you. Like some of the guys on squad get told to take 2 weeks off, and by day 5 they've cracked and they're back at the range. But
like
you know,
hiding around,
yeah, exactly,
like, shoot an arrow, hide from the coach. Yeah,
exactly. But at least a few days, and
yeah,
like 1 or 2 weeks is common and good,
yeah,
I think, and
yeah,
definitely, something to be done.
yeah.
There's very few good reasons not to do that I can think of.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I just wanted to kind of make that a really strong point there, because I think it's really easy to get caught up in it, isn't it? That kind of more is more.
Yeah.
But having that disconnect is really good, especially if you can make it a mental disconnect as well, and maybe even a location disconnect if you can go and physically remove yourself from the area.
Ideal.
Yeah.
A lot of people do go on holiday for it, and it works really well. And I think it's not just this whole kind of like, it's easy to kind of come across to this and it's like, well, you're just not trying that hard, are you? You could train harder. You can train on Christmas. You can do that. But I think if you take the break, then for the other 50 weeks of the year, you can train harder. So it's not even like I'm slacking off by doing this. I think I can do more the rest of the time by not doing something now, and it's just having that kind of foresight to plan ahead instead of just being in the moment and being like, well, if I'm not training, I'm getting worse, and
debunk the kind of macho rubbish that's like you must train every day
no, you must train the right amount for you,
exactly.
find what that is and make it as efficient as possible as well. That's how you'll get as good as you can be, and no one knows fully what the fine answers to those questions are. Like, even a Kim Woo Jin or a Chang Hai Jin doesn't know, does like 400 or 410 arrows a day make me Olympic champion? They're not quite sure, but they've got it narrowed down to a pretty well rehearsed sort of band of things. They kind of know to a pretty good extent what it is that they need to do, and then they go and do it. And for them, they're training in the most efficient way for them, and it's not it's not the same as what the most efficient way is for you. Necessarily.
I think that's really key, isn't it? And I think that kind of segueing a little bit onto the technique, I think that is the same with the technique as well, in terms of what areas are really key. I just wanted to get your thoughts, I guess, before we finish up, on what areas of the technique would you say are super, super important, or say if there's someone like an archer club level or national level looking to kind of rise up a bit, what would you say are some key skills, if you like, that are really essential? So obviously there's millions of different parts of the technique, but what are some key aspects that like you must, grasp how to do this? What would you say those are?
To me, I think there is. This is one of the ones where I will give a fairly clear answer rather than being like it depends a little bit, because I think there is an absolutely important one. The most important, the most critical part is that moment of execution, and the bit that happens just around that. Because I see a lot of people put so much effort into doing exactly the same thing on their setup, and all this kind of like lift it and pause and shuffle around and then draw a bit and then shuffle around a bit again. Now by the time they've got to full draw, they've knackered themselves and they try and finish the shot and it's just a bit soft. And I'm
exactly.
like, you could have saved yourself all that work, because the bit that matters is the moment of execution. So to me, that's the thing to really focus on. Go ahead.
The execution, for anyone who's not clear with the terminology, execution is basically moment of release. It's the same thing. So that exact moment when you release is what we sometimes call execution.
Yeah, because the way I see it is you can almost make up for anything else you've done beforehand at the moment of execution. Because if you've set up slightly differently, just because you raised the bow an extra 5 degrees and before you brought it back down, you've ended up almost by definition, if you're at full draw, your sight's on the target, you are more or less to within the very fine tolerances that affect whether an arrow is in like the 9 or the 8 or the 10 or whatever. You're more or less in the same place. okay, if how you got there varied a little bit, then the kind of energy expended in each muscle and the elastic energy in your tendons is a little bit different. But that is all entirely compensatable at the moment of execution if you can keep that strong. So I think that the biggest part for me is putting effort into that part and knowing, okay, what is it that you do to finish a shot, especially if you're shooting recurve in this case. So if you're struggling to get through the clicker, if it's taking a little bit longer, how do you finish that shot? Because if you don't have an answer for that, then it's just gonna be a weak shot, and you get the whole it was weak and it went low and again, like, okay, well, that's no good. You could have saved it. You could have got more points for the same situation. Like, you know, one option is to come down and start again, but then that's a lot of work because you know, most shots aren't perfect, right? So if you follow that path too much and you start coming down for every single little thing that's not right, you just end up in this situation of you're having to draw 30 times for a 6-arrow end. And now,
it's not good. It's not good. Yeah.
And then that leads into a mental situation of not committing to the shot, and now you actually can't shoot it until you end up going down that road of not being able to shoot it until you're under time pressure, and that's just a bit of a nightmare. But even without that, you know, just knowing how to finish a shot in different scenarios. So maybe I've just had to come down because it got blown off the rest or something, and I've only got 10 seconds left, so I've not got time to recover, but I've got to come up again straight away. What do I do now? How do I have a slightly more brute force shot, perhaps, that gets me through the clicker and will get it safely somewhere near the middle of the target, rather than my normal shot, which is maybe a little bit more precise but takes a bit more time to coordinate. And that's super important in the wind as well. Again, if it's blowing an absolute gale and you're struggling to point it within the blue, there's not much point expending all your energy and your finest accuracy to get it into the 10 when, you know, if you hold on too long and you get caught out, you're going to get pushed off. So you're much better off having a simpler, quicker shot that you can then execute really quickly and just get it in the gold. And we do work on that at a squad level. That's an exercise we do sometimes. It's just like, okay, how many goals can you shoot? Like, we don't actually worry about the 10 so much. And I remember a training camp in Cyprus, we turned up and it was apocalyptic. Like, just
like terrible
just
weather,
absolutely howling with wind. I watched Tom Barber go set up and start shooting, and the rest of us were kind of standing under the shelter thinking, he's going to fall over. Like, you cannot shoot in this. This is ridiculous. And the coaches were like, right, on you go. First person to 36 golds. And I remember being like, this is taking, like, we're going to shoot the first end, and they're going to realise how ridiculous this is, and we're going to pack it up and call it a day. But actually it was doable. You just had to let go a little bit and stop trying so hard to be accurate and just pick your moments. Accept the larger float. Group and accept the float and everything. And I was like, oh, you know what? Actually, that's really doable. You know, it's not as hard as I thought. So, being flexible in your approach. There's more than one way to shoot an arrow, but you need to know all of them and have practiced all of them to be ready to use them in a competition, I think.
Yeah, and then obviously being flexible, but knowing what the key bit that you're inflexible with.
Exactly.
So in your case, being inflexible with that execution.
So if I'm having to kind of do a more forced execution for whatever reason, again, I can let other things vary a little bit. There's no point me trying to come up when I'm tired and I've not got much time on the clock, and then feeling that the pressure again on my bow hand, I used that as the example before, if I feel that's slightly not right, God, no, just chuck it. It doesn't matter that I don't have time to deal with that. So just ignore it and focus on the thing that will get me out of the situation. Especially in competition, because your whole sense of time gets completely distorted.
Warped
and messed up in those situations. So, like, I remember turning up at Nîmes once, and Nîmes is a competition I've really enjoyed and done well at a lot of times. But I think the most recent time I went, I'd had another treatment on my wrist a few weeks beforehand, and I'd
Yeah.
barely been shooting. So I rock up, not
wow,
quite kind of with it all, and I get a few ends through the qualifying. I'm starting to settle the nerves, and then I'm kind of like, yeah, I'll take a bit more time in between shots. And then when I look up at the clock after my first arrow, and it says like 28 seconds. What the?
Oh.
And just that instant like adrenaline rush. Oh, holy. Okay.
Yeah.
And now, you know, I could spend a whole ranking round there, like squeezing out the difference between a couple of 9s hitting the 10 is maybe the difference between me being in the top 16 and the bottom 16 or not making the cut.
Yeah.
And yet all of a sudden now it really doesn't matter about those fine distinctions, because if I don't get these 2 arrows on the target, you know, it's a write-off. It doesn't matter what else happens. So
it's just gone. Yeah.
So yeah, having the kind of practice and experience to just go, right, here we go. Time to shift these. Let's take the brakes off. More aggressive shot, quicker timing, less fine control. Even like an immediate moving the clicker could be an option. Like there's all sorts of things you can do in that instance to make sure that you get the arrows gone, and that's going to make, you know, I'd much rather have 2 9s than a 10 and a miss. It kind of it goes without saying mathematically, as it is. If you go for it, you might also get the 10s. You give yourself that chance. But if you don't get the arrow away in time, or if you try and control it too much, then, you know, it's not going to work out.
It's
for
gone,
you.
isn't it?
Yeah, and I think everyone who's been to a lot of competitions has seen that happen to someone at some point, and you're just like,
you think just at least shoot it, somewhere.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever gone out of time. In my 10 years of shooting, I'm fairly like, I can't be certain, but I don't remember ever getting blown off the line. And given that I used to need like 6 minutes to shoot my 6 arrows basically beforehand, because I used to be really, you know, not as fit and not as like I said before, my technique was really inefficient. So I'd always get down to the last sort of minute and still have 3 to go, and 30 seconds and still have 2 to go, and I'd always be like pushing the limit on time, but I never got timed out on it, because I always just had a kind of like big red button inside my brain to kind of go punch it.
This is the get it gone.
I think.
And with the that's a really good point. I love the point about the execution you make about it being really important. One thing I want to touch on there as well is, can you describe, so I kind of put the words in your mouth slightly, I guess, but something I say a lot of the time is, when people watch archery, they have this warped perception of what it is, because you look up and down the line and you see, you know, everyone shooting, particularly the Koreans who everyone looks at shooting, and it looks so effortless and so easy and so placid that most people don't understand that actually internally it needs to feel very, very aggressive sometimes. And even if you're in a pressure situation, sometimes it feels obscenely aggressive, like you're ripping the shot through almost. Can you just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it ties into the execution thing as well. I think if you're like, being aggressive can get you out of a lot of sort of troublesome scenarios. I've definitely got pictures in the past of me, you know, when you see someone do that really clean technique, but it's really fast, there's a lot going on under the hood. And kind of 4 or 5 years ago, before I really worked on my technique a lot, you saw it all, because I would shoot and I'd just go bam, and I'd end up with like both my arms somewhere behind me like this, but it was always kind of ripping it apart and being really strong at the moment of execution. It's a lot of force that's going on. Like I guess a good sort of illustration of it is, every time I've handed my bow to a Team GB athlete from another sport, so rowers,
like
gymnasts, you know, anyone I've handed it to has gone, okay, let's look at this. Absolutely, these guys.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
These guys would eat me alive in the gym. You know, they'd bench press me with one hand while eating a sandwich. Like it's not even funny how much stronger than me they are most of the time. But in this specific thing, they're weak.
Yeah.
And archery is that really, really weird balance between raw power and absolute fine control, and mastering them both at the same time. And I think that the bow allows you to do that because it stores all of that power. And your technique is what makes it kind of efficient, and it makes you able to do it again and again. But there's no kind of getting around that. It's ultimately 50 pounds is 50 pounds. No matter how strong you get, you've still got to put in the effort to shoot it every single time. And if you slack off, then the bow shoots you instead of you shooting the bow. And I think it is super important, and it's something you only really experience by doing it. But I would, in my kind of spirit of getting people to find what works for them and playing with things, I'd encourage people to play with shooting really aggressively and shooting really passively, and just
definitely
take what you normally do and push it to the extremes in either direction and see how it works. Definitely, there was a team match I did. And team matches for me especially get really are the most hyped up ones. They're the ones I really enjoy the most, to be honest. I did a team match in Shanghai in 2019. And the other guys, they were struggling a little bit. They weren't quite grouping. I'd just been knocked out of the individual from a high seeded position just beforehand, so I was fuming. I was really angry about being knocked out. And I went into this team match, and it was like the first round team match, and we were again the much higher team in the seedings, and I was like, no, I'm not losing this match. It's not happening. I don't care what anyone else says. And I just that's definitely like the most hyped up I've ever been. But I kept it all inside, and it was just a case of I'd go on the line and absolutely rip the bow apart, and I took all my frustration out on the bow, and I got like 7 10s and 1 9 in that match, and just absolutely, like, it was a combination of pure aggression but also that kind of feedback, almost lack of the, like I was talking about earlier, the not focusing on any one thing. I was so consumed in being angry and ripping the bow apart that I wasn't thinking anything about my technique, and I just knew if I got on the line and did it until it went, then it would go into 10. I just had absolute sort of faith and certainty in that point. And then the last arrow finished, and I was like, rah! Kind of let out
MVP moment. That's the MVP.
Let it all out at the end of the match, and kind of like, it's in a stadium as well, so it kind of echoed around. And it was like, but the guys were like, okay, cool. You can't rely on that happening every time, but like I think that shows how aggressive you can get, and still, and it doesn't necessarily stop you also being ridiculously accurate. So play with it a little bit. You might be surprised by what you can do.
The way I kind of like to think of it sometimes, like an analogy, is if you've got, a crosswind and you shoot a projectile, maybe an arrow, I guess is appropriate. You shoot an arrow and you shoot the arrow 5 miles an hour, it's going to get hit by the crosswind a fair bit. If you shoot it 500 miles an hour, it's going to be less affected. And the same is true for the execution. If you do this bit so aggressively this way, any small little movement is going to affect it less. And that's where you get that.
Richard will happily sort of take apart videos of some of the Korean archers in slow motion and say, actually, look at all these mistakes they're making, but you don't see it because it's so fast and aggressive that they've just like covered it over. It's like kind of wallpapering over the problem, right? They've just ripped it off, and even though they flinched, it doesn't matter because they were still like overall in control of what they were doing, and their kind of aggression and speed of execution sort of got them out of trouble on that one. So again, it's definitely, it doesn't all have to be kind of ultimate precision and poise and balance and everything like that. That's nice. That's nice if you can do that too. I think it's probably a good like a good training exercise to be able to do that kind of ultimate fine balance using the minimum effort possible to shoot an arrow and still have it be precise. But definitely be prepared for that to not be available to you in competition, because
Yeah.
it rarely is. Rarely do you get the chance to actually do that.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that as well. Most of the time you need to be a bit more committed and aggressive. Some days, like you alluded to, some days you'll be there and you're like, oh, I can be very precise and manipulate everything how I want, but those are the golden days and they're few and far between.
Yeah.
So you need you need your other method. Yeah. Awesome. No, that's really good. I guess that's a good place to wrap up there. I think I think we've touched on a load of different topics there, really, particularly on the kind of mental aspect of things, and then going through the injury, and then just your thoughts on like the technique and what the important areas are. I think is really, really useful.
It's a bit of
I hope people take
a tour de force, really.
Yeah.
Some of the things we'd kind of thought about beforehand, and some of them like just came up spontaneously as well. Definitely need more water next time, that's for sure.
Yeah, but no, that's been really good. So I guess I'd just like to say thanks Tom for joining us, and thanks for all the viewers. Hopefully that's been useful. Hopefully you can take something away from that as well. And then also obviously all the best, Tom, and I'm sure all the viewers would join me in saying this as well, all the best for the rehab from the injury and building back up in the training. I'm sure it sounds like you've got that, nailed, and you're really on that already. So I can see like you're motivated to do that as well.
Yeah, thank you.
So
really appreciate it.
For the selection shoot in March, and then onwards to fingers crossed for Tokyo 2021.
It's definitely the year of uncertainty in all things, isn't it? So it's a good time to be flexible, I think. But really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed talking shop.
No, it's been great. Yeah,
for a good while. It's good to go through all these things. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. No worries. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much, and thanks everyone to viewing. And I'll see you later.